So hello, this is Reverend Christy Bates of the Embracing Simplicity Contemplative Order and also of Paucity Counseling and Direction. And I'm here with Yvonne Lewis, my friend from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who is an MDiv, is a licensed professional counselor, and is a certified Brainspotting practitioner. And I felt very bonded to Yvonne after we got to work together in one of the Brainspotting trainings, and we discovered in our conversation doing that training that we both had this wish to help bring Brainspotting to Mississippi in a larger way and in a more supportive way. So she is a co-founding member with me of the Brainspotting Mississippi peer consult group. And I'll let her tell you more about her background and how she got interested in this. But Yvonne, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, you are so welcome. You know, one of the first memories that I have with you is you have such a loving, comforting, warm, and welcoming presence. And it was because of that that my spirit was just drawn to you. And then when you mentioned the opportunity to connect in another way because of the Mississippi connection, I just knew this was something that I wanted to be a part of. And so I thank you so much for us connecting, because it's really important to bring this kind of treatment to Mississippi and other states that might not have access to this. That's something that's really important to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for those words. I felt that connection to you as well. And I think it's so neat in those trainings sometimes how there's somebody that can be on the screen, you know, when you're in the larger group, and somebody you just feel a little bit drawn to, and then they put you in those breakout rooms and pair you up, and it's like, oh, there she is, you know. So it's really beautiful when it happens that way. But yeah, so tell us about, you know, other than just sort of in general, that wish that Mississippi and other states where Brainspotting is not as common, tell us about your connection to Mississippi.
Yes. So my mom, who is 88 years old, was born in Mississippi in the Meridian area, Porterville, actually, DeKalb County. And, you know, as a child, I remember going to Mississippi, loved my papa and his truck, and just had really great memories of Mississippi. Love the tall trees, and so it just brought back a lot of good memories. And, you know, as we get older, I think for myself, this is a second career, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but you get to this place, Christine, where you want to give back. You want to give back. And I thought, how can I give back to those areas and places and people who have helped form and shape my views on life and my experiences? So, you know, Mississippi was one of those places, because I thought, okay, number one, how many people in Mississippi have heard of Brainspotting? And then especially the African-American community. Are there any African-American therapists who could, you know, do the Brainspotting? And then I figured that it would be so few practitioners available. And I said, you know what, maybe I need to be one of the ones, or the first ones, to try to get licensed in Mississippi. So I do have goals to try to do that. But it really started, back to your question, is the experiences that I had as a child. And I still have family members in Mississippi. And one of the things that I'm really connecting with, because I haven't really, like, you know, when you get, for me, starting the career, the other career, I was more focused on that. But in the later years of life, I am more wanting to make those family connections. And interesting enough, I was in Mississippi maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 2 or 3 years ago. And I was, Christine, I was at the table because you know how it is when you first start brain spotting.
Mhm.
You want to do it on everyone, okay?
Right. Yeah.
You gotta try this. And so these were family members. So I'm sitting at the table and talking to my family. It was my mom and a couple of cousins. But it was interesting because one of the cousins really connected with it. And so I ended up at the hotel that we were at, actually doing a brain spotting session with her. And it was, I remember the session was something about healing and the relationship that she had with her mom.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's so remarkable that, you know, part of brain spotting is following your instincts, you know, as a practitioner, clinician. And so did the session with her, and it brought her healing with her mom. Her mom ended up dying like a month later. So
Oh my
she was
goodness.
able to make that connection with her. But it started at a table
Yeah.
explaining brain spotting.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Just sharing what you've been doing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So yeah, so you made reference to your earlier career. How did you end up, you know, what was that? Whatever you'd like to share about that. And then how
Yeah.
did you make this turn toward counseling?
So it was, let's see. So I've did television, was a weekend news anchor for like 27 years, a career in television.
Mhm.
And just one day, it was really a faith walk, a faith journey.
Mhm.
And just felt that I needed to leave television. And it was, I just needed to quit my job. And I thought, oh, this is crazy. This is crazy. And what are people going to think? You know,
Right.
I'm on television. I'm supposed to, you know, have all my mental faculties together. And I'm
Supposed to be
supposed
this
to,
role model and yeah.
yes, all of those things. And then to suddenly just, you know, quit my job. And I remember my family, they don't remember, but they didn't talk to me for like 10 days because I thought, you know, why would you give this up?
Mhm.
And really felt compelled to do that. And it just took me on many different journeys and experiences along the way. And I remember I was at a church one day, and this lady said, you know, you should become a counselor or something like that. And I thought, I don't know, but I began to explore it. And when I did, it was like the last day of enrollment at the college.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I saw that as a sign
Mhm.
um, that that was something that I should do. Um, so I really enjoy, you know, one of the things, and I'm glad you asked that question because it had always bothered me in television, building relationships with people very quickly to get
Yes.
the story, and then to have to leave, tell the
Mhm.
story because you have a deadline, you have to tell the story, and then you move on to the next story.
So you build
So
up this rapport and then you're gone. Yeah, gotcha.
yes, and I feel that that was traumatizing,
Mm.
constantly
Mhm.
building connections. I'm a person who's about connections,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just, you know, quick, you know, that's not me. I
Mhm.
want the connections.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I realized it later what was going on is that, you know, that's not me. That career was not me.
Mhm.
And I like to sit with people. I'd like to check up on people.
Mhm.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
And so that career never afforded me that opportunity, rarely.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the counseling profession does, because I can sit with
Mhm. Mhm.
people, whatever the experiences are,
Yeah.
and so that they can get well. And whether or not they, there's closure in the relationship, it's okay because it's their journey. It's however they want to end it or continue it.
Right.
If it's a year later or whatever it is, or no contact at all, that's okay. Because it's not about me, it's about them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, yeah. Not about you getting what you need from them and then moving on, but more being available to them for whatever they need. And yeah.
Yeah. It's also interesting because I always wanted to be a doctor. I was thinking about this. Always wanted to be a doctor, and from a young child.
Yeah.
And I want to be a doctor, and I'd always say, because I want to help people. So interesting.
Yeah.
That is, I'm doing the healing part.
Yes. Yes.
But it's the emotional healing.
Right.
That's happening,
Yeah.
So
That is
cool.
very cool. Was Brainspotting part of your work from the beginning of your work in counseling, or did that come a little later?
No, Christine. So I had finished all of the exams and everything for counseling. I had finished the counseling process and was, I think I was about to be, credentialed for LPC without the supervision. I was done with the supervision, done with everything, just waiting on the paperwork.
Yeah.
And I was, happened to be at the office. There was a client, and I'd finished with the client. And I mean, probably, 20 feet away was someone who was doing a brain spotting session. I was already enrolled. I was 4 days away from an EMDR training that was in Tulsa.
Wow.
And so I had to walk past this office where they were doing the brain spotting demo. And I thought, why not? Even though I am going to take, EMDR, it doesn't hurt to just see what this is. And when I saw, Christine, what brain spotting did for another clinician that it was being demoed on, and I started feeling things, I said, what is that? And it was 2 weeks later, I was on the clinician told me, she said, don't take it from anyone but Pi Fry. And the next training that she had was in Southeast Louisiana State University.
Oh, neat.
So I was on the plane. I was being trained.
Wow.
And yeah, but and I've never looked back, and I still would like to take to have a session with EMDR just so I could see, because clients do ask about it and they're more familiar with it.
Right.
But I like brain spotting because it's a much gentler approach, I feel, than the setup that I know that's required for EMDR.
Well, so one of the questions that I like to ask people when I'm talking to other clinicians that do brain spotting, I mean, we have the little tagline that we all hear in our trainings about where you look affects how you feel, but how do you explain brain spotting to clients if they ask about it? Or
okay, so one of the things, okay, so I was in a training with David, and it was, he said, I asked the question, about brain spotting and how it was discovered, but I just wanted to hear it from him.
Yeah.
And at the very end, I mean, I was like so nervous to ask him that question because we were in, one of the Zoom meetings. And he said, Yvonne, take brain spotting and make it your own. That was so liberating for me.
Right.
Because I have gone through life trying to fit in to all of these things. Okay, what do I need to be here? That people pleasing part.
Yeah.
What do I need to do here? And how do I? But when he said that, something just opened up. And So that changed the way in which I talk about brain spotting. And it's even rare that I even talk about brain spotting, because the truth is people are doing brain spotting all the time.
Right.
And when I notice them looking a place, then I'll just say, just I noticed you were looking there, just stay there, you know. So when in the early on though, when I was explaining brain spotting, I would just say it's a brain body based therapy. And when we can connect the brain and the body with a fixed eye position, healing can occur. And I gotta be me. So I would say, you know, what brain spotting feels like is, you know how it is when you're constipated. I would give this example. I said, when you're constipated, you know, it's very difficult to pass. But when you connect traumatic memories from the brain, what's stored in the body, and you meet with this fixed eye position, there is a release that happens, just like after being constipated. You know, and so, yeah. So that's one way that I describe it. And so I've come up with different ways of how trauma affects how trauma and a therapeutic method like brain spotting. And I don't even say like, you know, try this technique. I say an exercise. I call it an exercise. And it was someone that I was just practicing with, and I just said, you know, and she recommended, she said, "Oh, you know, it sounds better if you just said an exercise." And I like that because it's more inviting than, "Oh, I want you to do this technique."
Yeah, a technique sounds like something you have to master before it can do you some good, where an exercise is something you can just try out.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just kind of see what their tolerance is, how they feel, you know, and when they feel good, then that's it. And then we can just, you know, I just want them to be able to experience what it feels like for their body to let go. And then I, of course, identify the 3 most common areas that I have seen clients have hold the trauma, you know, the throat, chest, and the gut area.
Right.
Yeah.
Just sort of that whole area. So in mindfulness circles, sometimes we'll talk about how this whole area where our emotional processing is, you know, and I will sometimes speak in terms of metabolizing our experience, right, through this area. So in that sense of like whatever stuck can move. So that really works as a metaphor. Yeah.
Yes. So we come up with the, you know, whatever works. And so I see trauma, and I tell them, you know, brain spotting is like an emotional roller coaster. And I kind of want to ride with that roller coaster with them while they're in the office with me, so they can see what the processing is like. And I say, you know, when these traumatic memories occur, then we just keep going over the same things, and we get stuck. And it's like being on this roller coaster and being stuck in midair. And so me as a therapist, I come along, get in the roller coaster with you,
right,
and help guide you so that you can complete the ride.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So that's one way I describe it. And then I've come up with another way that clients like too. And I said, you know, imagine a tornado that's happens alongside a river. And because of trauma, it affects our nervous system. And I said, a tornado that's alongside the river. And so there is debris that's placed in the river. And so that river doesn't flow naturally because there's debris in the river. And I say, that's trauma. That's the trauma. And so when we just slowly take the pieces of debris out of the river, the buckets and the trash and the, the limbs, then the river can begin to flow as it was intended to flow.
Right.
And, so there's a new pattern. Yes, you will remember that there was trauma. There was something that happened in that area, but it doesn't affect you that way. And the river continues to flow. It no longer has to make a detour.
Right.
In our nervous system and causing autoimmune diseases and so many other health issues, because it's going places, the trauma is going places it wasn't intended to go.
Yeah. Oh, that's very rich. I love how creative therapists are, and just how we are constantly in the situation of creating on the spot those metaphors, those symbols, those things, particularly depending on who we're sitting with and what communicates to them,
Yes, because, everyone is different, and you're right. Whoever is in front of us, we need to have the kind of language that they best understand. And because there's going to be another disconnect if, and a disconnect and this person can't help me, they're not understanding what I'm saying. So I will adapt the language to whatever is needed.
Oh, that's really rich. Well, and I know, and we were talking about this before we started recording, actually, how, some people had experiences in schooling or maybe agencies they worked in where it was about having a certain form of treatment and the whole goal is for clients to comply. I was fortunate that even before Brainspotting, my background allowed me a deep training in following the client. And it sounds like you kind of tend to naturally do that also.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that comes from, just having experiences where being forced to do something, you have to do it this way. And you have to be in this box. And we know that everyone doesn't fit in the box, They have different experiences where they need to be allowed to be themselves. They need permission, they need encouragement, they need guidance. And, some of the language, of course, that we use in Brainspotting is we invite, clients, and I'm always saying, I invite you to consider, because when we can give them choices, they can define what it is they need. They can help define who they are, because clients come with so many restrictions already upon who they should be because of their parents and the expectations, and it so impedes their growth. And then that ends up, we only know what we've been taught, what we've had modeled for us. And so when those experiences we can validate, how they feel, and invite them to feel what you feel. And when they feel what they feel, and I said, it's okay, whatever it is that you want to say, this is a no judgment zone. There's no judgment. And immediately, as what happens is when they can speak what they have not been able to speak before.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And Christine, we get to witness this every day.
I know. Yeah.
Every day that a client is before us, we get to see that. I don't know of other modalities that happens.
Right. Where we actually get to see movement almost every single session.
Yes.
Yeah. It hits my gratitude list almost every night. I have and it's really, it's like something that has happened during the workday that is really so remarkable to be in the same space with somebody to watch that happen. It is, and
Yes.
it's a blessing and it's an honor, but it's also invigorating. I just cannot imagine having, just to think about during this pandemic, the last couple of years, if I was only working with maybe more mainstream types of therapy, how burned out and drained I might feel. But this is so invigorating to watch people make progress from week to week.
Yes, yes. One thing that I will say, because you kind of talked about the burnout a little bit, for me, I I will I will have so many clients. I've had as many as 13 clients in one day.
Gosh.
Not all of them have been like in office, but most of them were in office and then sessions between them, just people trying to get in,
Yep.
And so I never want to not love this, because I am totally in my lane with brain spotting. Totally. My friends will tell you, everyone will tell you.
Right.
And so I have to be careful, because there is this, need to help people and desire to help people, and then when you have clients who have had a good experience and then they tell someone, and so that person is trying to get in when you're saying you're not taking any other clients. So there has to be this balance, so I'm pulling back just a little bit to put a little bit more space in there, so that I can continue until, as long as my mom is 88 and she still has a little job that she works, and so I may be, because I keep thinking, oh my gosh, she's 88. That means I'm going to be in therapy. I'm going to be a therapist well, until I'm 88 or longer. Because it's being modeled for me. So I want to create the space for myself, so that I can continue this journey of giving. And one of the things that I really want to do is, when I quit the television station, I had a friend had asked me to teach at one of the correctional facilities. And I did, and I really enjoyed it. I was kind of surprised. And that's really how the idea of the quilt for child abuse, in memory of child abuse children who died in the state of Oklahoma, that's where that idea of doing more work in the prison came from, was realizing there's a need for education. And I thought, I would like to work with inmates, because there's so much trauma.
Right.
So much trauma. And if they could understand what happened, because I do this big psychoeducation piece in the beginning, and I've learned to do that. I want to do this big piece about trauma. And that's what I really like to do. I really like to do that. Yeah, that's one of the things. Another one of the things is, I was telling you, coordinating our schedules, I'm doing a trauma series at church. That's another thing that's really important to me, especially in the African American community, because we have this culture of, oh, we don't talk about that. And it's within other cultures too.
Sure.
But from my experience, there's so much, shame, judgment, criticism, that we hide and we wear this mask. And we want everything to be okay with, that I'm fine. I think about Facebook, and, this is the image, this is the mask that, people want the world to see.
Right.
It's not real. And so one of my things that's really, as I was praying, that I really felt a need for, is to introduce, do this whole psychoeducation piece about trauma, how what are my topics? Intergenerational trauma. Tomorrow, I'm talking about shame, abandonment, and rejection. I'm going to do childhood trauma, and then I'm going to do coping skills for trauma. And already it's, when people understand, then that stigma of, oh, you're crazy and you don't need any, mental health, then you don't, need any of these things. But they're seeing how they have stored, trauma in the body. And, as we know with the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, how the health outcomes are severely impacted because we're still holding on to trauma.
Right. That makes me want to ask you about, and I wish I could remember which book it was, because it was 25 years ago or something, but I remember reading Alice Walker saying in one of her novels that it's hard some character was finding it hard to get someone to commit to therapy. And she was saying, for people who have seen their parents struggle, right, with being oppressed, it's hard to acknowledge what our parents have passed along. That it's almost like there's this, when you are so aware of what maybe abuse your parents went through or the discrimination they face or things like that, it makes it hard to just name, not with intention of blame, but just to name, oh yeah, this did get passed along to me. And it is trauma that, but what I love about this is being able to invite somebody into a process of healing intergenerational trauma. It's like, this isn't about blaming our parents. This is about doing the work that has been passed along to us to do.
Yes. And when we do that, and I'm sure that you probably experience this too, but when we can acknowledge it, then there is empathy for the parents, for what happened to us, what that trauma was. There is empathy. And then, because I've had clients that say, well, I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them because I knew what they went through. So then there's that empathy that comes in. And then after the empathy is I'm thinking of a couple of clients, they can actually face the person, whether it's family member or abuse or some sort, they can actually face them, and find forgiveness.
Right. Yeah.
And that completes that cycle of healing.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think for so many people, the idea of sort of being, for lack of a better word, psychologically savvy or trauma savvy, doesn't always match up with people's experience of church settings. But I have a really good girlfriend that we have a daily phone call first thing in the morning during the weekdays. And one of the things that she was saying, she was talking about a workshop she went to, that she became really aware that, oh, your parents are your first God, your first higher power, however you want to language that. And so, and she made me remember, I had a friend years ago who said, I'm going to have to fire my dad as God and let God be God, right? That was her way of languaging that. And and so I just wonder, are you finding that as you bring this teaching into church settings, that people are having those sorts of realizations?
So, I remember, because people have, I've witnessed people have traumatic experiences around church and around religion.
Sure.
And I mean, from, being children and scolded or beaten in church, because their child's behavior has brought shame. Right. And so there's this anger at what happened, and no one stood up for them when the parents were doing this in church, and totally to turn away from anything resembling God or any higher power or anything, and And so one of the things that I do know is that I have a gift of healing anyway, right? So this, along with the brain spotting, along with the sensitivity of understanding the difference between religion and relationships, you know, I'm able to communicate in a way that's inviting, that's, you know, comforting to individuals who have been wounded.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
one of my really dear friends, she was an anchor at the station that I worked with. She practices Buddhism and Hinduism, and she just wrote a book. And she did a walk of faith, and we're really good friends. And so she calls me her mentor. She actually did a documentary too, which is phenomenal. And I'm really, really proud of her growth, you know, in just exploring and her faith and wherever that takes her, you know. And it's so beautiful to be a witness to that, because, you know, from someone or anyone that starts with, you know, not having a relationship with a higher power or God, that they are coming into relationship to know that spirituality is can be part of the healing process. Yeah. And so you know, we meet people where they are. We meet people where they are without judgment. You know, I love, you know, if I have a client and they are atheist or agnostic, you know, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it because it's about relationship. It's not about religion. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that, you know, of course, lots of my clients aren't necessarily theistic. And so sometimes if I'm asking them, especially in a group context, but even individually, I'll say, you know, ask them to check in sort of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? Physically, emotionally, you know, mentally and spiritually. And very often, you know, they'll kind of bristle at spiritual. And I'll say, I'm asking you, you know, when it comes right down to it, I'm asking you, do you feel connected in yourself? Do you feel connected to the world around you? Do you feel a part of everything? Do you feel a part of nature? What, you know, or not? Do you feel cut off? Do you feel, and then that they can do, they can say, oh, well, I can talk about that, you know.
That's good.
Yeah. That sense of relationship to self, world, others.
Yes. Yeah. That kind of reminds me of the internal family systems, and I'm really interested in that. And that's actually how you and I connected, was that kind of therapy. And you know what I'm learning more in this journey is that there isn't one kind of approach. I mean, you know, we have the brain spotting community and we think brain spotting is the best, but it doesn't work for everyone. I'm just going to say that. Some people don't like it because they're not maybe as in touch with their body, and as their body is doing all of these things, it's like, okay, what are you doing? I will say too, one reason I rarely use the pointer, and the reason is because people that I've experienced in the African American community, especially, they have some barriers with the pointer. And I've heard witchcraft, I've heard, you know, demonic stuff with the pointer. And so this is part of being, you know, attuned with them to know that that might present a barrier. So I won't introduce the pointer until I've had, you know, other sessions with them so that they have built the trust. And then I will say, okay, I really, you know, invite you to focus on this issue. And to do that, I need the pointer for this.
Right. If you feel like they need a little more precision. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. then that helps. Yeah.
Mhm. That makes so much sense. I think about when I was working in residential trauma treatment, there were a couple of people where I couldn't use anything that looked like it could be a weapon, is what it came down
Yes.
to,
Yes. Mhm.
And so sometimes it was even a matter of, instead of using the brain spotting pointer, if they did need more precision, we would do like a stack of markers, of colorful children's markers, just anything to make it less threatening, or
Yeah.
but just that, such an important point of being aware of who's in front of you and what's helpful and not helpful. And sometimes with these different the idea of making something your own, I have a friend in the meditation community that talks about, there's so many tools and things that we have, and all these different lists of list of factors, and he thinks of them as like ingredients of a recipe. So for instance, mindfulness is going to be an ingredient in most of your recipes, just like if you're a baker, flour is going to be the ingredient in tons of recipes. And I think about that when we are doing, and when David says, take this and make it your own, part of it is you're making your own recipe of the tools you use and what's appropriate for the person in front of you, and all of that. Yeah.
Yes. It's what is best for the client, and then taking that, that back seat and just watching, and with brain spotting too, is that you don't have to say very much at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's that presence. It's what you bring to the session, that comforting, that peace that allows for that processing. That I'm thinking of polyvagal theory and the ventral, that safety. We need to know that the person across from us is safe before we can, work on the anxiety or the depression or whatever issue that brings us. We need safety for healing to happen.
Yeah. So important. Yeah. Well, I tell you, sometime I do hope sometime when you're coming to, even though I live in North Mississippi, I would travel to meet you in South Mississippi. If you're coming to visit family, I would love to see you in person sometime.
Yes. So my steps are to, because I'm trying to think how long I've been licensed. I think it's 3 or 4 years, but I don't know. I can't remember if I have to be 2 years or 5 years with Mississippi. And so that's where I am in that process to get, so that I can get licensed there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's exciting. Yeah. Well, is there anything before I end the recording, is there anything about brain spotting or your journey with brain spotting or experience of that you wanted to share that you haven't gotten a chance to share yet?
I think one of the most powerful sessions, this happened most recently, probably within the last month or so. I was invited to this really nice restaurant with a friend, and with 2 friends there. And I had mentioned depression. I had mentioned the word depression in conversation. And the friend had a response to it and began gagging and coughing, and so I'm thinking, I'm just watching, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on?
Right.
Because I'm wearing the friend role and I'm not wearing the therapist hat, so I'm just like watching, like, what's going on here, And I noticed she'd gotten out her inhaler, was drinking water, and I just went over and I sat next to her went over and sat next to her. And I said, when you're ready, say the word depression again. And so she did. And she began expelling more of, the mucus and things.
Wow.
And then when she began crying, and it was a belly cry, it was a deep crying. And after she finished that, I came back over. And that's when I just, said, look, these different places, and this time without judgment, just say whatever it is.
Mhm.
And what I didn't know was that she had some throat issues anyway, some paralysis on one of the vocal cords.
Yeah.
And we talked about the vagus nerve and gave her a vagus nerve exercise. And she went to the chiropractor the next day and said that she was not having the procedure that she was going to have.
Mm.
That was the most remarkable experience with Brainspotting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just happened over dinner practically. It wasn't even, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I just, I'm so grateful. You were talking about the gratitude each night and writing what you're grateful for. I'm so grateful to David Grand, the Brainspotting community. I'm grateful to you, Christine, because you understand the need to help marginalized people.
Mhm.
And you understand that it is compassion, it is dual attunement, the connection with people that really is what brings the healing. Our presence, So I
Right.
really appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And that brings me to the one more thing, kind of I don't know if it's the last thing, but it's the one more thing for sure that I wanted to be sure to ask you about, which is, thinking in terms of therapists hearing this or seeing this conversation that are clinicians of color in our state, in this state, any other state, what would you want them to hear from you about the need for representation and why it matters, if it matters, in terms of, counseling in general, but brain spotting in particular?
Yes, it really is important to have other clinicians of color, because I get calls from individuals often because they want to connect with a counselor, and they only want to connect with a counselor who might have a similar experience or background as they have. Keep in mind that, Christine, we've talked about intergenerational trauma, and sometimes people come to the counseling process, already shunned or, ridiculed or made fun of for even going to a counselor. So when they take that step to come to a counselor, if right off the bat, it's not someone who understands their experience, they can shut down and not want to engage again. So at least if there is a person of color or that understands people and marginalized people and experiences, then there is a greater probability of them staying with the counseling process, engaging with the counseling process, and helping others in their families heal. That's why it's important, because they want that connection. I mean, the fact, I'm just honored when they can make a phone call and they can inquire. And I think that's probably why I've had like 13 clients in a day, is because especially when I hear that it's a first time person for wanting therapy, I feel obliged to be able to at least have that experience with them, then it's also important to have choices. So I tell them, I may or may not be the right fit for you. So again, letting them know that they have a choice, but there are others. So keep searching. Keep searching. That just because I'm African-American, you are not stuck with me.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
you're not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's rich. That's so important. So hopefully, if anybody's listening to this that has felt a little tug toward counseling or, just hearing this and hearing the message that you are needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And if they would like to talk with me further, that's totally my lane. I would totally be willing to help them see what, a demonstration of it to see
Oh, that's lovely.
I would love to do that. I would love.
Thank you
to
so
offer
much.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for people who have had at least a phase 1 of training, you can also see Yvonne and me the first Tuesday of each month when we get on our peer consult group for Brainspotting practice. So yeah. Well, Yvonne, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'll end our recording here.
Thank you.
Yeah.